So my name is Matthew Tao, and I will be presenting um, about the Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashes that had just recently happened in late 2017, early 2018. So this is what that plane looks like, the Boeing 737-8 MAX 8. So the reason this plane went down in the first place has to do with the overall sensor system of this plane. And so overall, there are many types of sensors on commercial airplanes, including the AOA, which is a angle of attack sensor, a pitot tube, which shows you your altitude and your speed, and a static port, which shows you the pressure of the atmosphere. So the way that these commercial airplanes use sensors is that they have many of the same kind of sensor on one single plane. So let's say there are four pitot tubes on a plane, and this is for if one goes bad. So they're all reading the same thing when they're all working, right? So when one goes bad, you'll be able to know because three of them say the same thing, and one is saying something else. So that's kind of how they have a little fail-safe for their kinds of for their sensor systems. And specifically on the Boeing 737 MAX 8, there is a new software system called the MCAS, which stands for Maneuvering Characteristic Augmentation System. And so this was um, a program, somewhat like a autopilot, but more of a safety type feature that Boeing was trying to do, which um, so including with all this, the sensors, the software, the planes had crashed right after takeoff because of the MCAS and the sensors. So that worked like this. The planes would take off. The AOA, which is the angle of attack, which shows the angle of your plane, uh, they were reading wrong. And the MCAS, the software, thought that the plane was stalling, which is when there's no air going over the wings and you're at too high of an angle so that you just start falling out of the air. And the only way to get out of a stall is you dip your nose back down to get some speed again, get air flowing over the wings, and then you pull back up to regular flight. And since um, the MCS thought that the plane was in stall and was just going to fall and crash, it made the plane nosedive. So then, right after takeoff, the plane just instantly nosedived and had crashed. So there are two sides to this coin. One being that it's Boeing's fault. They're the ones who made the plane. They made this. They made like obviously there are software issues. So that's a big reason why people think it's Boeing's fault. There's also proof that this 737 MAX 8 is actually an outdated airframe. It was made in about the 1960s, which today's standards have obviously gotten a lot better than back then. And also, there's a lot of push that Boeing created this plane focusing more on profit than safety. And this is coming from the engineers in the engineers in Boeing that have shown that they wanted to do let's say more safety testing. But the higher ups in the company would say no, it's too expensive. Let's just do it how it is. We'll be fine. And obviously that's not how it didn't work out like that. So the other side would be that it's the pilot slash the sensor's fault. So the reasoning for this for the pilots is that the pilots are not properly trained with the MCAS, the software. So when it happened, when it started to nosedive, they couldn't fix it. They couldn't pull the plane back up to how they wanted. Um, so that's the pilots were not trained properly for this evasive action that could have saved many lives. Another would be, well, obviously the sensors failed. You can't blame the software for the sensors being bad. Well, sensors fail more on planes than one would think. That's why they have the many sensors on a plane system. But even uh, so, some believe that it would be the sensor's fault. And well, a thing for Boeing, in Boeing's favor, would be that well, only 2 crashes occurred of these planes, and there were many, many flying in the hundreds. So only 2 crashing before getting them down. It's almost impossible to see this exact issue happening. So from this, there were some changes to the aerospace field. Right now, there is a redesign of the Boeing 737 Max-8 uh, with the FDA to redesign it all, make it a new airframe, fix the MCAS, and to get this plane back up into the air. And now, because of these crashes, there's a lot more thought about safety over profit. It was a lot like a wake-up call for Boeing and companies like that create these planes that remember we're not invincible. Safety still should be over profit, so they can obviously stay in business. And there's a lot more extensive testing happening to all types of planes now to make sure something like this doesn't happen again, just to keep everything as safe as possible. Thank you. Any questions?